Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Tonight I wanted to talk to you about the latest proposal that came from Israel and the likelihood of that being accepted to reach a ceasefire or a phase between the first phase of the ceasefire and the second ceasefire, what it entails, the likelihood of any sort of success, why Netanyahu is proposing it, and what did the Palestinians respond with. Then we're going to talk about the latest statements that came from Israel, this time in relation to Egypt and the infrastructure in Sinai, things that are Israel considering to be more dangerous than the Egyptian military presence inside of Sinai. But we will begin with the ceasefire and the proposal. So yesterday we spoke about Israel having a counter proposal to the proposal that came from Egypt to have a 40 to 50 day ceasefire up until we reach phase 2. The Egyptians proposed that the Palestinian resistance will be releasing 5 Israeli prisoners of war and that there will be a ceasefire for 50 days. Aid will go back into Gaza and Gaza will start slowly rebuilding, getting into the process of phase 2 and the process of ending the war, and talking about the day after all of this. No longer a case of just dragging and canceling and having a different type of agreement, having a progress that will lead to the end of the war. The Palestinian resistance accepted that. Reports said that the Americans accepted that. Israel, and yesterday we spoke about that, came with a counter proposal. That counter proposal was submitted to the mediators and to the Palestinian side as well. Now we have details of what this includes. So the reports are confirming that Benjamin Netanyahu is proposing a 40 to 50 day ceasefire in exchange for Hamas and the Palestinian resistance to release half of the remaining Israeli prisoners of war, dead and alive. But there's one big problem. That problem is Benjamin Netanyahu does not want these people to be released en masse on multiple phases. He wants them to be released all at once. And then there's another problem. That other problem is that he wants them to be released on the first day. Meaning Benjamin Netanyahu wants to get all of the benefits from the ceasefire and then do whatever he wants. And so far we saw what Benjamin Netanyahu does. He gets what he wants, he moves and breaches and continues to kill innocent people inside of the Gaza Strip. The UNICEF had a very concerning report today that ever since the ceasefire broke, over 100 Palestinian children a day are either killed or severely wounded. And they're publishing numbers that are horrendous in terms of level, in terms of damage to the children inside of the Gaza Strip, let alone the population as well. So Netanyahu wants all of the benefits so he can go back and have all of the genocide in Gaza and continue with his plans. Why is he doing that, and what is the likelihood? That's something that's very important. But before we get into that, there are other problems with this ceasefire agreement that Israel is proposing too, which are primarily the demand to completely disarm the Palestinian resistance. That's something that the Palestinian side said multiple times, that it's not just only a red line, it's 1,000 red lines, and that's not going to happen. The Palestinian resistance will not be disarming unless there is, well, liberation, a Palestinian state, the end of the Israeli occupation, looking at things from a bigger perspective, but Israel wants them to disarm without giving anything. And that's something that's completely unacceptable by the Palestinian side. And he also wants to expel all of the Hamas leadership from Gaza. And yesterday we spoke about how, from Benjamin Netanyahu's perspective, his conditions, and they haven't published all of the details, by the way, like they did today, but his conditions are there to make it impossible to reach any sort of deal. Benjamin Netanyahu wants this to completely drag until the moment he decides to take a step back. And that could be any moment, by the way. Benjamin Netanyahu, if he sees fit, or if he sees that the ending of the war, the genocide, is suitable at any given moment, he will go ahead with it. If he finds it suitable to sit down and directly have talks with Hamas, that's if the other side agrees, he will do that too. Benjamin Netanyahu will do all of that. But there's one very big reason why Benjamin Netanyahu is now trying to have these efforts. And there are also certain reports in Israel that there might be some sort of success to this ceasefire agreement, because they might be preparing the Israeli public opinion to accept something, even if it's less than what Israel initially wants. And that's something that happened multiple times, not only since October the 7th, 2023, but during many previous escalations with Gaza too. Netanyahu is doing that, and he is still engaging, actually. The fact that Benjamin Netanyahu and his delegation are engaging in the negotiations are primarily to show those who are criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu inside of Israel that there are still some efforts taking place to reach a ceasefire. He's seeing that there's a lot of pressure against him, and he doesn't want to be viewed as a person who isn't taking any sort of initiative or having any type of progress, like what he was doing with the Biden administration before, by the way, when he was negotiating for the sake of negotiation, rather than negotiating to try and reach a deal. And that's something that the delegation used to say before as well, but that's why now he has Ron Dermer heading the delegation rather than the normal people who usually take on the tasks of negotiating, including negotiating prisoner exchange deals and ceasefires too. The top leading figures in the Israeli security, military and intelligence establishments. So he wants to show these people inside of Israel criticizing him and protesting against him, and these protests are escalating very heavily. He wants to show them that, well, I'm taking effort, I'm making an effort, I'm trying to reach a deal, just be patient with me. The fact that we are reaching this stage is because of the military pressure. This is the explanation of Benjamin Netanyahu. And hopefully we will have something that's better than before. Although what Hamas accepted from the Egyptian side, by the way, which Israel considered to be a step back from Hamas, is what they accepted before, which is a ceasefire. They will not be releasing everyone, but that would include guarantees to end the war. But now the thing is, Benjamin Netanyahu is saying, I am not ending the war unless Gaza fully disarms and Hamas are expelled. So, very complex situation, not confidence inspiring. Benjamin Netanyahu might reach a moment soon where he would consider having a ceasefire agreement or an extension or something, but that's going to be very problematic with the Palestinian side because, well, we've been here several times, haven't we? Israel accepting a ceasefire and then breaking that ceasefire. So, very tricky situation, not confidence inspiring, not very likely to happen in the next few days or even maybe the next few weeks. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Israel Hayom in Israel published a report today in which they were quoting a senior Israeli official speaking about the infrastructure that Egypt is having in the Sinai Peninsula. And they have addressed, in this report, they're confirming that Israel addressed Egypt and the United States, asking Egypt to dismantle all of this infrastructure that, well, resembles a very significant breach of the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. And one Israeli official, according to that report, said that this has a very high priority with the Israeli Minister of Defense or Defense Minister in Israel, and that Israel will not accept this reality. This is something very dangerous because this same report is saying that Israel is considering the Egyptian infrastructure in the Sinai Peninsula more dangerous than the presence of the Egyptian army and the Egyptian tanks and the Egyptian arms in the Sinai Peninsula. And their argument is, well, tanks and fighters or armed members, they can retreat. They can take a step back, you can take them back. Infrastructure, it's there to stay. And we are very concerned about this infrastructure. What's going to happen after this? Is Egypt likely to do anything to dismantle this infrastructure? How is the relation anyway between Israel and Egypt? Well, that's something that is very, very important, firstly, in relation to Gaza and in general. And we've been talking about this since the beginning of the genocide inside of the Gaza Strip. The situation between Egypt and Israel is probably at an all-time low since the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. Egypt has been breaching the peace treaty. Well, they breached every line of it, according to an Israeli official in Amman who was focusing on the infrastructure in the Arab world. He said Egypt, by what they're doing in Sinai, breached every line of that ceasefire agreement. We spoke about that a very long time ago. We spoke at the time about 60 tunnels that Egypt has inside of the Sinai Peninsula. And the Israeli concern here, by the way, is for Egypt to have anything to stand up against and defend itself against an Israeli aggression, by the way. This is what Israel is scared of. And of course, potential attack against Israel, because that's something they're preparing for too. At the time, when we spoke about this report from Israel, things have only been de-escalating. More presence in the Sinai Peninsula, unprecedented numbers of troops, over 100,000, military deployment, armed police deployment, the top figures in the Egyptian army going to next to the Gaza borders as well, and Egypt constantly being on a very high alert in that area. That's something that Israel is concerned about. It's seeing this progress as not very reasonable, it's not justifiable. And they previously said, very recently, that it only means that they're preparing for a case of a war. And now they're asking them to completely dismantle this, with these senior officials confirming that the case has a very high priority when it comes to the Israeli defense minister. If this has a very high priority from Israel, that means that there is a very high risk against Israel. We're not talking about necessarily an imminent war, but there are tensions that could take us to something very dangerous. Now, is Egypt likely to do something about this? And the answer to this comes when we read what Egypt has been doing all along, the feedback that they've been getting both from the Israelis and Americans, and the treatment that they're giving to Israel alongside the negotiation based in Gaza, or based in Egypt in relation to Gaza, with Qatar too. Egypt breached multiple things of the peace treaty. They haven't necessarily agreed to anything that Israel proposed. Israel made several proposals to Egypt in relation to the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing. All of them were rejected by Egypt, most of them. And Egypt isn't likely to change anything from the progress that it's doing in the Sinai Peninsula, even if Israel views this as a very big threat. And that is something that we understand from the diplomatic relations that they have. Egypt is not cutting any diplomatic relations with Israel altogether because they have an interest to reach a deal with Gaza. Gaza is something very important to Egypt, and they need to make sure that they reach a ceasefire that will ensure an Israeli withdrawal. They don't want them present from the Philadelphia corridor side. And also, they never had any level of presence like they do have now in the Sinai Peninsula, meaning that they're not only sending messages to Israel, but they're also preparing for something very big that can happen with Israel. Even with the diplomatic relations not being completely cut between Egypt and Israel, they still have many problems at a diplomatic level. The other day we spoke about the Egyptian government, in particular the Egyptian president, not accepting the new Israeli ambassador who was sent to Egypt. Usually you will have these ambassadors being approved by the government. All of the new ambassadors to Egypt were accepted. The Israeli ambassador was not accepted, meaning Egypt is telling Israel in a diplomatic language, we are not cutting the ties with you, but we're not interested in you. We're not interested in any good relations or improving the relations between us. And we only want to have a situation where we deal with the current problems that we have and get them resolved. And so long as these problems are not resolved, we're not interested in having your ambassador. We're not even interested in talking to you. And the Egyptians, from the talks perspective with Israel, it's only been from a security side, by the way. Presidents or president, prime minister, they're not talking. As a matter of fact, the president of Egypt hasn't been talking with the American president. He refused an invitation. Nothing is happening on that front. It doesn't look like he's going to the US anytime soon. No senior or very senior official is coming to Egypt too. All of that is because of what Israel is doing inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, the United States, from their side, because they view both Egypt and Israel as very important and very strategic in the region, they're trying to diffuse as much as possible. But the problem is they are stuck with a situation where the lobby that's supporting Israel is much stronger than the lobby supporting Egypt. And Egypt, by the way, they have missions going to the United States back and forth. Many officials go to the Pentagon, to the White House, and senior meetings happen very frequently and regularly, especially in relation to the US relationship with Israel and the genocide that's taking place in the Gaza Strip. The United States is trying to diffuse as much as possible, but the recent approach of the United States that is so tied with Benjamin Netanyahu and that is allowing Benjamin Netanyahu to get away with murder isn't helping. And that's affecting their relationship with Egypt. And that's something that we're seeing and have been seeing for the past several years with the recent report as well that they're getting Chinese fighter jets too. Now, they're trying. They're still trying. That's why they had proposals in. They want to end the war. They want things to go back to being normal. They want de-escalation and stability too. But Israel is not giving them that. They haven't given up so far. The question is, and it's a very dangerous question, an important question too, how long will they give Israel to comply up until they decide to, that's it, hand the task to someone else? This is a very important question, because if Egypt reaches a point where they say we're no longer interested in being a mediator because we are not seeing any sincerity, integrity, or respect to any agreements whatsoever, and take themselves out of the equation, this puts them and can put them in a much more hostile position against Israel and potentially against the United States too. They would be more at liberty to take certain measures or actions that would not be helpful for Israel. They would potentially make it easier for certain things to happen in the Sinai Peninsula that Israel wouldn't see in a good way. They wouldn't like it that much. And it would also open the door for a more cooperative approach with countries that are more hostile to Israel and the United States too. And we're seeing remnants of that. We're seeing elements of that happening, but it hasn't reached that stage. And the bigger question is, will the United States administration let it reach that stage where Egypt is no longer a country participating in the talks? Because so far they've been spending over 1.5 years trying to de-escalate the situation, reach a diplomatic solution, always being met with constant Israeli breaches, and these breaches are costing the people their lives inside of the Gaza Strip, with people dying every single day, being murdered by this genocidal entity. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this video, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace.